This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. Your host, Harry Wilkinson.
Yes, this is your host, Harry Wilkinson, and welcome once again to the Spirit and Wellness Show. This is the show where we take a look at the days and weeks events, happenings in the world of politics, technology, international news, everything that affects us, affects our world, everything that we hear about, perhaps on a daily basis through any number of ways, since we do have so many ways of being sort of bombarded with information. And we take a look at all of the stories and information. We take a step back and we look at it from a higher perspective. From a higher perspective, of course, I am, if you've listened to the show before, you know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't, from a higher perspective, I mean taking a look at these situations, many of which can be button pushing for us. Many of which can cause all kinds of responses, anxiety, stress. We don't maybe understand or become aware of how stressful just being bombarded with or being exposed to a lot of media stories that are not particularly positive, informative, well thought out, or just plain disturbing. So much of it comes at us because everybody is fighting for listeners or viewers, and so the most titillating aspects of our world seem to get prioritized, in a way. But in any case, to be prepared to deal with that, to know how to deal with that kind of situation, is, I think, increasingly becoming an essential skill. Since, as I've said many times, unless you're willing to live on a mountaintop, you can only disengage so much from this kind of thing. And so it becomes incumbent upon us to learn how to deal with information like this in a healthy way. My perspective is a metaphysical perspective, that we are all one being, if you will, one in divine mind, is the term I like to use, and that we, at that level of what we are, which is the truest level of what we are, in best way I know how to put that, in which we get to experience via our our human game bodies. You can think of them as sort of avatars in which we navigate this material, mundane world that we have created. And we experience these things as a way to sort of have experiences that, at our highest level of being, we know are not true. Turn away from stories that upset us to recognize the truth of them, to let the feelings that may be coming up within you rise up, feel them, and allow them to get to the point where you're ready to look at them in a different way by saying and understanding the truth of what's happening, which is, this is a created situation, and you can take your energy from it and begin to recognize the intricacy of the illusion, the depth of the illusion, and how well crafted it is. It really makes you think. Sometimes, depending on the situation, it really makes you think that it's really the truth of everything. But once you get behind that, once you understand that that's what's going on, you can take your energy from the situation. You can begin to feel, instead of powerless, you begin to feel that you are empowered, because you know how to recognize the truth of these situations. You know how to take that step back, come from the higher perspective, and connect to the highest level of yourself. That's what we do here on this show. I try to take a look at some stories, news stories, in a different way. That's part of the process. I consider it to be a wellness issue, which is why I have the wellness portion of in the title, because I think it's, as I said, increasingly important that we learn how to deal with what is potentially toxic stuff coming at us from all manner of media. It's as important for your state of mind as anything else, and your state of mind is where health begins, or ill health also begins, which is what we are really looking at in depth these past couple of episodes. So self-healing and mental health is what we're starting to get into now. If you've been listening the past couple of weeks, we've been talking about how as a society we've become over-medicated, and these medications aren't particularly helping us, and in many situations hurting us. And we've also been talking about the amazing ability that we have to heal ourselves, and how to optimize that. And looking at today's headlines, I see that this couldn't be more timely, since we seem to be, we're in a time when powers that be seem to be trying to make it as difficult as possible for many people to have health care coverage or to see a doctor. Understanding the process of self-healing becomes critical. And understanding that seeing a doctor, though we think of that as being, and certainly if you are in a crisis situation, you need to see a doctor. And I don't recommend, not seeing a doctor when you need to, but there's also many ways that we have of self-healing, and it becomes important to understand how you can do it, when you can do it, when it's appropriate, when you need to go see a doctor. But from what I've read and what I'm learning, it can absolutely cut down on your need to see a doctor, cut down on your doctor visits, cut down on all of those things. So it's important stuff to understand. But in any case, the most recent headlines here involve our president using his executive powers to cut off health care subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. So these are the subsidies that the Affordable Care Act put into place to encourage insurance companies to keep their premiums low or give discounted premiums to people who are mid and lower income, who might not be able to afford them otherwise. So, just here's the basic deal about that and how it may affect us going forward. If you are among the many Americans who get your health care from the exchanges and Obamacare, and you're getting a subsidy from the government, it's going to be, you're going to have that, but the insurance companies may raise the premiums. So it could be, depending on what your financial situation is, it could be that where you might not have had to pay for premiums, you might find yourself having to do that. It just really depends on how Congress responds to this executive order, and whether they are going to protect those elements in the Affordable Care Act, or are they going to side with Trump, as it were. So it just remains to be seen what happens with that. But to take the step back and look at the higher perspective of all of this, it's the complications that surround all of these insurance company machinations really, I think, inform us pretty powerfully that we're kind of playing this sort of shell game with our own health. And rather than turning over our health to outside forces, we can begin to take back our own, I don't want to say responsibility, it's more of our own control over our own health. And we see that there's many ways to do that, and self-healing, of course, is what we're talking about on this show. But there's also an amazing amount of information out there, and ways to kind of gauge your own health through websites like WebMD. There's web tools that help you to recognize when you might need to lose weight and the best way to go about that. A lot of things that, in earlier days, simpler days, you would be able to sit down and have a conversation with your doctor about. But the fact of the matter these days seems to be that, doctors don't have a lot of time to spend with you. If you've been to a doctor's office, you probably realize that you spend 10, 15, 20 minutes, maybe half an hour waiting for the doctor, while the nurse takes your blood pressure and does all of those attendant things.